Hi everyone and welcome back to Panathlon People. I'm your host Dom Fenton and I am so honoured to be here with Jodie Ounsley. Jodie, how are you?
I'm all good, thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Brilliant, thank you. So good to have you and I can't wait for our conversation. So Jodie, for people who don't know who you are and what you do you want to just let us know into where you're at the moment and what you're doing and that side of it?
So long story short, I'm profoundly deaf. I was born profoundly deaf. And I discovered sport, grew a big passion for it, grew a love for it. And I'm lucky today to call it my job as a professional rugby player. And I've got my eyes on the Olympics. So that's where I am at the minute.
Wow. I love our conversations. Literally, we were just having a chat for the last 15 minutes. And I thought, actually, we just need to record it because it was that sort of conversation where we talk about how sport and other activities can inspire children, young people, and adults alike.
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, if I didn't sort of find sport when I was in school, I really don't know where my life could have taken me. So it's so crazy how sort of a hobby, not just sport, how it can just sort of change your life for the better. And I think that's what sport did for me. And then when I discovered rugby, it's just honestly given me an amazing life. And it's just weird thinking about it.
Love that. Love that. So we're going to touch base on that now. So we might as well start. Let's start. So we want to start back at the beginning. So talk to me about your experience as a young person around, you know, you said you were born profoundly deaf. Were you around a lot of other deaf young people? What was your sort of early years and your childhood like?
Um, Unfortunately, I literally didn't have any sort of deaf people around me or deaf friends. I sort of just got my cochlear implant when I was 13 months old. And then I did go to the Elizabeth Foundation when I was 3 months old, but obviously I couldn't sort of communicate with other deaf children that age before I started school. And then I went to mainstream school. And then all throughout school, I was like the only deaf person. I'd never come across another deaf person in school. And it was only when I went to the Deaf Olympics in 2017, so I was like 16, and that's sort of when I were sort of whole deaf community. And I just had no idea it existed, as bad as it sounds, but it really opened my eyes. And so I've met so many friends now in the deaf community, and yeah, it's just opened my eyes. And I just wish I sort of even came across another deaf person in school, as daft as it sounds. But yeah, that's just how it was.
So obviously, so you went to mainstream school.
Yeah.
You know how was your experience at school? Do you were there? You know, did you feel isolated at all at times? Were you heavily involved in PE and sport within school, and that's primary and secondary?
Yeah. I struggled, but that I only struggled with the academics. I wasn't very academic. I struggled a lot. I missed a lot in lesson, and I was very shy, so I wouldn't have the confidence to go to a teacher and say, "Oh, I need help." I'd just stay quiet and struggle through it, which is the worst thing to do. But I was really lucky that I had a small group of friends who always had my back, and obviously they weren't deaf, but they could understand I was struggling, and they just helped me through it. And it was good that we all went through high school together as well. So I always had that group of friends, which I was really lucky to have. But then that's when I sort of turned to PE. I absolutely love PE. Even in first school, I just got stuck in. And I think I realised I felt good at it. So I just got stuck in, and it sort of made me forget about the academics. And yeah, I just loved it. And I think that was sort of I wouldn't say escape, but it just took my focus elsewhere. And that's how it was. And I really loved it. And yeah, it just gave me a passion, really. Um,
Yeah, and I think that is, as much as you say, not really an escape. Actually, sometimes it can be.
Yeah, I think, yeah, when you look into it, I think it was.
I think it's, I think it's one of those situations that, yes, schools need to be driven academically, but actually we know that physical activity, we know that PE and sport are as is important.
Yeah, 100%.
Just because of how children are and how they're growing up. Um, what's so you said you got stuck in? Were there any barriers that you had at school in terms of PE and sport? Whether that's still primary or secondary.
Um, I didn't actually in sport. I just got on with it. It was fine. Because we didn't really do sort of contact sport, so it didn't really affect sort of my implant situation. So that was absolutely fine. Just got stuck in everything I could. It was more when I discovered rugby much later in sort of high school. That's where I realised, oh, there might have some barriers here. But obviously we looked into that and got round it. But yeah, in school, I just literally any sport, I just wanted to get stuck in. I even did dance, and I am not a dancer. I did ballet and tap dance, but it got to the point where my mum told me that the tap dance teacher said that I sounded like an elephant and I was too heavy on my feet. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, so that's sort of when I realised, okay, maybe dance is not my sport and I need to go more to a contact sport. But yeah, just literally anything. It just made me feel so happy and just meeting new people and mixing with people. And I think it's so important for kids these days. So that really helped me, yeah.
So you were talking about obviously growing up in school, not knowing other deaf children, not being involved with deaf children, and that didn't happen till 16.
Yeah.
And that's a long time for any child to go through their life. Well, that's almost your childhood gone. That virtually is your childhood gone. So obviously, from a Panathlon point of view, we run events for hearing impaired and deaf children. How, when you were a child, how would you have thought? Would you have liked to have gone to those sort of events? Do you think that would have supported you even more when you were younger?
Yeah, I looking at it now, I think I would have absolutely loved it. And I think it would have just helped me sort of mix with more obviously deaf kids and that. But I think it would have just helped grow my confidence and open my eyes a bit more and just getting involved, more active rather than just sort of feeling a little bit isolated in school and the only deaf kid and you know what I mean? But yeah, I think it would have been amazing. And even my parents, they would have thought I've absolutely loved it. And I think it's so great now kids have the opportunity to have that experience. I just think it's brilliant.
Good. So we're talking about, and it crops up a little bit when we're talking about isolation. How important is it do you see that for children we can break down that isolation? Whether that is by coming to events, whether that's by being involved in the deaf community. How important do you think? How important do you think that is?
I think it's so important, even if it's just I think it's so easy just to get in a little rut and be sort of by yourself. And even if you're a shy person, it's hard to sort of talk to people. But something like this, it's just brilliant. You're sort of forced to talk to people. You're forced to sort of, do teamwork and communicate with people. And I think it's amazing. And before you know it, you're growing confidence. You're mixing with people you never thought you would. And you're just having a good time, sort of doing, exercise and whatnot. It's so important these days just to try and find a passion, I guess, and just grow confidence. And it'll help so much later on in life. That's what I think anyway.
So in terms, and I think it is really important. I think whether the children are hearing impaired or deaf, or even I think any child,
yeah,
can feel isolated, and I think it's that whole bit of trying to find out what works for them. And we sort of discussed this before we started the podcast, and how important it is to find what they enjoy.
Yeah, because I think everyone has the barriers. Everyone has different struggles. You don't have to have a disability or whatnot. everyone has struggles. So I think and not everyone, likes sports. That's just how it is. It's just sort of, I think it's just finding something you enjoy, or finding something you feel passionate about, or even that's something that makes you feel good, makes you feel happy. And yeah, I just think it's so important that we just try and find that, and the benefits you can get from that. I think it could be, life changing if you find it.
Yeah, completely agree. I completely agree. And and that's and for us, that's what we look at. We're looking at providing these opportunities for as many children as we can. And actually, how did you're now, looking at you now, you're very confident. You are. You may not always be, but obviously with what you're doing and everything else, where did that confidence start from?
Being honest, I think when I started rugby, so throughout school, I was always very shy. So literally, I didn't like going speaking to people, or even if it was in the shop, I would not go and speak to, to ask for something. But with rugby, it's a team sport, and it forced me to speak to people. And also the added factor of me being deaf, I had to explain to people about the situation. So even though it was really uncomfortable, it was a really good thing for me. And I think from there, my confidence sort of built up a little bit. And then when I went into the England setup, that was an extra push. So I had to be more confident. And I think it just got better bit by bit. And I'm still shy now, but I think looking back, even 2 years ago, I've changed drastically. So I think it's just slowly pushing yourself out your comfort zone and feeling uncomfortable, but you get so much from it. That's what I've learned.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And as you say, I think, I can't wait to see the rest of your journey. And actually, I just think, obviously for me personally, I've got a passion about rugby anyway. And we've already said we could talk for half a day probably on just that subject. But I just think it is that we need to grow as people, and actually by looking at those comfort zones, finding what we enjoy, and being around other people, actually is really, really important.
100%.
So your cochlear implant, when did that happen? When did you have that put in?
I got it when I was 13 months old. So I know at that time I was one of the youngest to have it done, but obviously now sort of many kids have it done younger and have 2 normally. But yeah, at that time I was one of the youngest. And from there it was just like a journey of having a cochlear implant. But yeah, it was weird because my parents have never come across a cochlear implant, or even, a sort of a deaf child. So it was definitely a learning curve for us all. And yeah, it's been amazing though. It's just given so many opportunities with it.
So actually, from a positive aspect, it's really enhanced what your life is now.
Yeah. Like even now, me and my parents say, even though, it's a disability or whatnot, I have had so many opportunities and positives from it. And I don't think I would have been the person I am today if I wasn't deaf, as daft as that sounds.
Yeah.
But it's sort of shaped me and sort of grown me into a person that I am today. So I'm very sort of passionate about, I think everyone gets sort of struggles and overcomes barriers in life, but I think it's how you see it. Do you go in one way, or no, I'm just going to carry on struggling, I'm not going to try and do anything about it? Or are you actually going to think, you know what, I can do something about this, I can change it into something positive, and then years down the line, it's could have honestly like changed your life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I love that, and that is the thing. And I think actually it is that bit about just going, actually, this is a positive for me.
Yeah.
It is a positive, and these are the positives that are going to come out of it. And as you say, you don't think you would have been necessarily the person you are now without having that done?
No, I think I would have been very different. I don't know what it would have looked like, but I know I just would have been. My path could have looked very different.
And what a path you're on now.
Pretty exciting one, but yeah, it's just, I think it's amazing how your life can sort of change, but I think it's so heavily relies on your mindset. And I know everyone says, oh, it's a positive mindset, but it's so true, even when you're struggling, and it's so easy to not think positive, but it's so weird how something so negative can actually be something really amazing. It's just how you see it and how you sort of react to it.
No, I completely agree. Last couple of questions. This time's flown by.
Yeah.
and that's why we can talk for hours. So you in your, you doing what you're doing now, you're still very young, compared to people like me. You're still very young. How do you see yourself how do you see your role as a role model to other young hearing impaired and deaf children? Do you take that quite seriously in terms of that? Because I think actually it's great for them. It's great for other children to be able to see what you're doing now and go, actually, I can achieve.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't personally see myself as a role model because I'm just like that. But I do feel really passionate about trying to help where I can. And I just wish, sort of when I was younger, I wish if I had sort of an example, a role model to look up to, I would think, oh my gosh, I can do that when I'm older. It's, possible. That is amazing. So I really want to be that, if that makes sense, and just put it into sort of kids' heads that you can, achieve, whether you've got a disability, whether you've got barriers to overcome, you can do it. It's just a lot of effort, a lot of work, but it's possible. So that's what I feel passionate, and I feel like I've got a responsibility to do that, and hopefully I can do that.
To be fair, you're doing it anyway, and I think the messages that have come out of the last 20 minutes, actually, for someone listening, I think are massive, because it is that bit of actually you can achieve, you can do anything, but for children with hearing impairment, for deaf children, actually to be able to see you as that someone they can aspire to be, or and say, look, well, she's done that, and Jodie's at that level now, you can achieve. And I think we've worked quite a lot together in terms of the Q&As that we've done with schools. The impact of those have been huge. And we're doing one later on. And I just think the fact that the way you communicate, the way you put your messages across, I think are amazing. So yeah. Last thing, and I do this on it now. Now I'm getting a regular at podcasts. This is the question I ask. So, if there was a school or a head teacher thinking about joining Panathlon but not sure, what would you say?
100% do it. Just go for it. I think it's so important. It's the benefits that it could bring for the kids is unbelievable, and just gaining that confidence, meeting new friends, it would be daft not to give it a go.
Love it. That's a wrap, everyone. Jodie, you've been amazing. When this goes out, you are going to inspire people, no doubt. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And this is Don Fenton signing off with Panathlon people. Take care.